Thank you so much. Our scripture this morning is from Genesis chapter 18, verses 10 through 15, Revised Standard Version. The Lord said, I will surely return to you in the spring, and Sarah, your wife, shall have a son. And Sarah was listening at the tent door behind him. Now Sarah and Abraham were old, advanced in age. It had ceased to be with Sarah after the manner of women. So Sarah laughed to herself, saying, After I've grown old and my husband is old, it is now that I shall have this pleasure? And the Lord said to Abraham, Why did Sarah laugh and say, Shall I indeed bear a child now that I am old? Is anything too hard for the Lord? At the appointed time I will return to you in the spring, and Sarah shall have a son. But Sarah denied, saying, I did not laugh, for she was afraid. And the Lord said, No, but you did. We'd like to think that the Bible is so sacred that surely it's above having a sense of humor, much less being the butt of a joke, yet there is plenty of fodder for humor there. For example, a cellist friend of mine who is currently playing in the orchestra for the opera Salome recently quipped online that John the Baptist sure was ahead of his time. And how about this one? Why was Noah the Bible's greatest financier? He was floating his stock while everyone else was in liquidation. Oh, yeah. Or this one of my favorites. Why did Noah have to give up fishing? He only had 2 worms. Now, but seriously, this moment between God, Abraham, and Sarah, it shows that even in the face of the unthinkable, and even in the face of the Almighty, with Sarah's case, the prospect of being with child well into her golden years, it shows that humor, nonetheless, is a gift. Recalling the line from Ecclesiastes from this morning's invitatory, it was neither a time to weep, it was either a time to weep or it was a time to laugh. And Sarah chose the latter. And does God withdraw the promise? No. The following year, she gives birth to a son whom they name Isaac, which in Hebrew means laughter. Sarah explains in chapter 21, God has brought me laughter, and everyone who hears about this will laugh with me. Sarah shows that leaning into the humor of your circumstances can help us find the way forward. And this is what Methodist theologian Theodore Loder was talking about when he described laughter as a bridge over which creatures tiptoe to meet one another. If you look at the front of your bulletin, you'll see those classic masks from the Commedia dell'arte representing comedy and tragedy. And back in my days in theater school, it was explained to us by our teachers that comedy equals tragedy plus timing. Comedy equals tragedy plus timing, which is why brazen comedians often get heckled with shouts of, too soon, too soon. Comedy equals tragedy plus time. When I reflect on the tragic moments of my life, I see how isolating they sometimes were. In conflict, we can feel singled out, we can feel abandoned. I know that after the great tragedy of September 11th, try as I may, I felt separated from God. To everything a season, time to weep, a time to laugh. And as metaphysicians, we know intellectually that God exists not just in the lighthearted parts of our life, but also in its darkest times. We struggle often to find the blessing in them. Difficult times can lead us to re-examine our priorities and reflect on what truly matters. When we find ourselves lost or struggling, laughter is often a hopeful beacon reminding us that joy still exists. It will be there for us when we are ready. A couple weeks ago, I had the good fortune to be invited to a sold-out event in the chapel at the Congressional Cemetery featuring a young comedian from Brooklyn named Ben Wasserman. And Wasserman had entitled his show Live After Death. And it was his personal response to losing 7 close friends and family members within a 3-year period. That evening was inspiring as it was amazing. And watching this young man create a space that was howling in laughter one moment and then solemnly hushed as members shared about moments of the deaths of their loved ones. Wasserman had this colorfully this colorful wheel labeled with words which he'd spin and then open up the floor for sharing and discussion. At one point, the wheel landed on life after death. And after a few jokes, he asked us about our views of the afterlife. And a woman seated directly behind me who had been laughing hard all evening raised her hand. And she shared that her late husband was a Buddhist who believed that his soul would be around her for 49 days after his death before he moved on. When did your husband die? And do you believe that? Wasserman asked. He died last Friday, the woman said matter-of-factly, at which point I think everyone in the chapel stopped breathing. And do I believe, she said, well, this is my sister, and her father was a strict Lutheran minister, to which the sister quickly interrupted, who later in life became an atheist, quit the ministry, and married a Jewish woman. And they both cracked up, and the whole room erupts in laughter with them. Now, it's important to note that we weren't laughing at their circumstances. We were laughing with them. And it was a moment that they felt safe creating for themselves, and we joined with them in support. But we weren't laughing at them, we were laughing with them. But that reminds me of a moment a long, long time ago. I was out to dinner with some of my closest friends and shared a vulnerable moment. I don't even remember what it was, but the entire table exploded in laughter, and I was mortified. My friend John gently puts his hand on my shoulder and says, "Oh, Brian, we're not laughing at you. We're laughing about you." Tragedy is tragedy plus timing, a time to weep, a time to laugh, and I chose to laugh. The tragic moment I'd shared is long lost, replaced with a cherished memory that my friends and I still laugh about to this day. Now, Wasserman's 3-year ordeal taught him to respect the power of laughter. He did not try to make those women laugh, but he did create a safe space for them to experience joy, even for a moment. And let that be a lesson to us all. Navigating the afterlife, as one example, it's tricky territory, even for seasoned ministers. The Reverend Laura McLaughlin of the First Spiritual Church in Bay City, Michigan, shared this cautionary tale with me. A man left for Chicago for a vacation in Key West, and his wife was on a business trip, and she planned to meet him the next day down there. When the man arrived in Florida, he emailed his wife to let her know he had arrived, but clumsy thumbs, he mistyped her email address, and instead, his email went to the inbox of a woman who had just passed away. When the grieving widow opened her email, she read the message, screamed, and passed out cold. And the woman's daughter rushed into the room and found this note on the computer screen. "My darling wife, just checked in. Everything is prepared for your arrival tomorrow. Looking forward to being with you again. Your loving husband. P.S. Sure is hot down here." Suffice it to say, laughter in itself is not a vice. Feature writer Josephine Nolan posted a compilation video of the Dalai Lama in full belly laughter on the internet. Laughter, she explained, is one of the few human functions that can immediately place us in the now. If you laugh in the face of sadness, you transform grief. If you giggle at your own stupidity, you learn wisdom, she wrote. Laughter has the power to banish demons, both internal and external. If you smile at the end of the day, you look forward to the next morning. Laughter is the ultimate magical power. If you can laugh, you are already a magician. If you tap into the magic of laughter, you have started on one of the paths to enlightenment. And this is what I like about the so-called laughing Buddha seen in Chinese restaurants. There's a wooden statue of one version of him down here below our flowers. I was always curious, because I know who the Buddha is, but when did Siddhartha get fat, right? He was supposed to be this ultimate good-looking man, the big man on campus, ultimately good-looking. When did he get fat? So I didn't understand the story of the laughing Buddha. So let me tell you a little bit about him. The laughing Buddha isn't a Buddha, much less the Buddha, Siddhartha, but he was a Chinese monk, and in most depictions, he's seen with a small cloth sack, which in Chinese they call a budai, and his belly is always exposed. So the sack holds his modest material possessions. The big belly represents his internal riches, also his sense of satisfaction. and exposing it to the world as if to say, I have nothing to defend. This is why he laughs. But it's that sack, the Bodai, that they call him the Bodai, and meaning the sack. But it became kind of transcribed into English as the Laughing Buddha. But looking back at our responsorial, John Templeton's guidance on joy is good guidance on using the power of laughter. If you look at your bulletin, he says, to get joy, we must give it. To keep joy, we must scatter it. And in some situations they allow us to equally revel in the power of laughter. Sometimes we have to read the room like intuitive comedians and simply distribute it like seeds. It's not our place to decide if someone who's hurting needs to laugh, but through little moments we can light a beacon reminding them that when they are ready, joy awaits always. When I consider this moment of Sarah and Abraham, I imagine that for Sarah to laugh when surprised with the blessing of first-time motherhood at the age of 90, her and Abraham's life was likely already one of laughter and joy. I look at this story as a reminder that for my heart and mind to lean towards lightness in hard times, I have to foster it in the easy times. I suspect joy is a default setting. I suspect joy was a default setting for Sarah. Otherwise, this morning's scripture would have concluded with, and God was shocked. But these are modern times. We live in cubicles, not tents. So I will leave you with a cautionary tale about conflict in the church workplace. There was a church where the preacher and the music minister were not getting along, and eventually their conflict began to spill over into the worship service. The congregation suspected that there might be a problem when the Reverend preached about commitment and how we should all dedicate ourselves to the service of God. That morning, the music minister led the choir in the classic hymn, I Shall Not Be Moved. The second week, the preacher's sermon was on tithing and how we should gladly give to the work of the Lord. The special music that morning, Jesus paid it all. The third week, the preacher preached on the dangers of gossiping, and the music director presented a stirring arrangement of I Love to Tell the Story. With all this going on, the preacher had enough, and the following Sunday told the congregation that he was considering resigning. The music director presented the classic, Oh, Why Not Tonight? As it came to pass, the preacher did indeed resign, and the next Sunday he informed the church that it was Jesus who led him there, and it was Jesus that was leading him away. The musical selection, what a friend we have in Jesus. Thank you, Arlington Metaphysical Chapel. You've been great